Hi, I'm Hallie Rubenhold, and this is my new book, The Five, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. The book is about the five women, the canonical five women, who were killed by Jack the Ripper in the summer and autumn of 1888. And they were Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. This book is about the five lives of the women. Jack the Ripper, their murderer, is completely absent from it. It is not a blood and guts story. It is a story about how they lived, how they survived, what their experiences were like in Victorian London and other parts of the country, and even in another country. This book also busts a lot of myths. So you may have heard, for example, that all the women killed were prostitutes. Actually, I found that there is no evidence to suggest that 3 of the 5 were involved in sex work whatsoever. All of the women, with the exception of the last one, Mary Jane Kelly, were in their 40s when they were killed. Mary Jane Kelly was 25. None of them came from Whitechapel. So this is all new and exciting material. So I'm standing out in front of Annie Chapman's house and on Montpellier Place in Knightsbridge, and many people are really surprised to hear that Annie Chapman and the 5th victim, Mary Jane Kelly, lived parts of their lives in Knightsbridge. Annie Chapman's father, George Smith, was in the 2nd Life Guard, which is the household cavalry. And so Annie grew up as an army brat, and she grew up largely between Knightsbridge and also Windsor, where he was stationed, and the family moved quite a lot. So in addition to living in this house, they lived in a number of other houses around this area in Knightsbridge as well. When George Smith got a bit older, he retired and he became a gentleman's valet, and he traveled around with one man who was a Crimean War hero and another man who owned a large estate in Wales. And unfortunately, he became very depressed. He was an alcoholic and he killed himself. And this legacy was felt by the family. And it's believed that one of the reasons why his widow, Ruth, was able to afford to live in a house like this was probably because of the payment she would have received from George's employer after death. Annie went on to be a household servant, and she worked for an architect. And then Annie came back, and we know that she was living here when she married her husband, John Chapman, who was a gentleman's coachman, in 1869. I'm here in Brompton Square, which was one of the centres of high-class prostitution in London in the late 19th century. And I've come here because we know Mary Jane Kelly, one of the victims of Jack the Ripper, the 5th victim and the final victim, lived in Knightsbridge, probably in Brompton Square, if not in one of the streets on the other side of the Brompton Road at some point in her life. We know the least about Mary Jane Kelly. In fact, Mary Jane Kelly was almost certainly not her real name, but the name that she gave herself after she left this area. So why did she leave Knightsbridge? She had it really good here. Evidence points to the fact that she was almost certainly trafficked to Paris, and she was able to escape. And rather than coming back here and alerting the people who would have trafficked her, she moved to the Ratcliffe Highway. In the East End, where she was, she had to reinvent herself. So it's almost certain that she took the name Mary Jane Kelly at that point and led a much more low-profile life. One of the difficulties we have as historians is when you don't actually have somebody's birth name or any real piece of factual information on which to base your research, it's very hard to get the purchase on the person you're researching. And so with Mary Jane Kelly, we have gone through censuses, we've gone through birth records, we've gone through all sorts of things, and it's almost impossible to find somebody called Mary Jane Kelly who was from where she said she was from. Well, at some point she said she was from Wales, and at some point she said she was from Ireland. It looks likely that she actually was from Wales, though her family may have come originally from Ireland. But she told different people different things about her life. She may have even been from a very good family and potentially had run away with a man when she was younger. It's unlikely she married and then found her way into the sex trade through that. But a great question mark will always hang over Mary Jane Kelly and who she actually was, which is one of the reasons why she is such a fascinating and attractive person to study. So I've just told you about 2 of the 5 women and only told you little tiny snippets of what there actually is in this book. And in fact, there are 3 other lives to explore. Each one of these women had completely unique and different lives. Their lives took them to all sorts of places, everywhere from Sweden to the Midlands, traveling around to obviously the slums of London, to country estates. And there's so much more to learn about them. And I really hope you enjoy the 5.